resources, I get the point, and I think everyone gets the point. In terms of what you can do, what you cannot do, is linked to the resources that you have. We recently had the chair of the police chief constables give evidence to this committee, and she said that police forces should not be hoarding money with regards to the reserves that they have. So starting with you, Mr. Tipping, how much reserves do you have in your police area? And just going across to Ms. Stevens, Ms. Lloyd and Ms. Holloway, simple question. If police forces should not be hoarding money, we've got around her figure, 1.6 billion in reserves. How much do you have? And then I can ask the question why it's not being used, but how much do you have in your reserves?
We have £5 million.
How much?
£5 million of usable reserves on a budget of 192 million. And let me just take you through the national figures. I've shared them with the clerk. We wrote to the Home Office on several occasions on recent months about reserves. We need to remember the reserves, revenue reserves, have come down since 2015 by 22%, as we predicted. We're predicting by March 2020 they'll come down by another 50%, from £1.6 billion now to 806 million. People use reserves to enable change. We need to build a new Bridewell, a new custody facility in Nottinghamshire. We need to build a new control room. Both of those are significant projects. Both of them, when they're in place, will enable us to save money. So we're using reserves to fund those. But
so just on that point, I totally get that. In terms of moving forward, using those reserves to be on the front line and go where they need to be gone. But say, for example, from 2010 to where we are now, your argument will be then those reserves that are now being used and being brought down should have been used on frontline policing, and that could have reduced crime that was taking place now. Would I be right on that?
I think there's an important discussion, Mr. Chishti, to be had about reserves. Reserves can only be used once. The Home Secretary has said to police forces, and this sum of money is divided between forces. It's not one pot. So some forces have got significant reserves, some have got very limited reserves. The cost of the police settlement, pay settlement, is 70 million.
I get that, but you've got 500 million reserves at the moment, is that right?
Sorry.
So your figure is 500. So what's yours? 5 million. 5 million, sorry.
But of course, those are revenue commitments that go year on year on year. And one of the things that forces have done, and particularly chief constables have done, is that the amount of funding from government has gone down by 25% over 5 or 6 years. Making cuts on that scale has been extremely difficult. Reserves have been used to cushion the blow, to have a glide path to enable it to happen.
In Edinburgh Somerset, when I was first elected in 2012, we had usable reserves of 23 million. By 2020, that will come down to 12 million, which is 4% of our budget, which is the minimum that we have been advised to. So we are spending reserves every single day.
It's
an interesting, it's a good question. In Hertfordshire, overnight cash, which is the same to come to that, very often we'll have £50 million sitting in overnight cash. But that's the gross reserve. If you look at the net reserve, we've got borrowing of £30 million. So that's a £20 million buffer that
can be used.
But of that, partially it's used as I'm sure that you're well aware, local government finance is rather complex. So you have revenue funding and you have capital funding. I think it was in the early 80s that it was decided that capital funding couldn't be used for revenue. So the money which sits as capital reserve can't be used as a revenue reserve. On top of that, I have said that over the next 4 years we will be spending 80% of those reserves. And if we don't use that, then we'll have to look to cutting the front.
You've got 20 million we're talking about at the moment,
yes.
Right?
Yeah. Net.
And to clarify, I have £3 million in general reserves that are available to spend for any purpose. HMIC in the efficiency report has just clarified that
is, frankly, the minimum level which is considered prudent for any public sector organisation at 3% of revenue. And to read my Chief Finance Officer's words, over any additional reserves, which are all earmarked, so to do what it says on the tin, earmarked for a purpose now. In 2021, the Force will use its reserves again, but if no additional funding can be found, it will have a £1 million shortfall that cannot be alleviated through savings.
There is an issue which we need to come to, if I may, within that, which is, in some ways, government policy has, or various colours, government policy has forced us into a rather extraordinary way with reserves, which is because we can't increase council tax by more than the referendum limit, 2% or £5 in my case. Very cautious treasurers will say you can't over the next 4 years increase that sufficiently for the problems that we have in 4 years' time. Were we to remove that limit on raising revenue, at that point you may well be able to use the reserves in a far more appropriate way.
To London being our international capital city around the world, would you still say that London is the safest international capital city around the world, taking into account the recent Visit London figures, which clearly show the number of people coming here year on year is increasing? So would you agree with that?
I think we are one of the safest global cities in the world, but I think we're at a tipping point.
Okay. And linked to that, just touching upon the tipping point, the issue of countering extremism and terrorism, I totally agree with the point you make with regards to the Assistant Commissioner Rowley when he said it's communities on the front line which help defeat extremism. And it's often members of the individuals' own communities which notify the police authorities, which lead to the police taking appropriate action. With that being the case, and looking at countering extremism and a key part of that being prevent, would you say that looking at London, the public who we are engaging with to help defeat extremism and terrorism have the confidence and the trust in prevent as it should do?
Oh, big question. By and large, some parts of the community have confidence in the police and in prevent, but a significant minority don't. The good news, in relation to the figures published last week, which should give you a source of optimism, is roughly speaking 10% of the referrals made to the authorities in relation to Islamist radicalisation, more than 10% came from friends and family.
Sure.
So these are Londoners these are British Muslims. That should be good news. By the way, the number of referrals from friends and family from right-wing groups was 5%. So it could be argued British Muslims are doing far more in relation to reporting friends and family than the far right side. But you'll appreciate that there are some parts of the community that worry about preventing the impact it has on labelling certain sections of the community.
Now tell me, just on that, from your experience, with the extensive community engagement that you have, how do we get it right? How do we build that trust, and how do we get the strategy to work and do what we all want to do, is get everyone engaged and have that confidence and trust?
Well, prevent polarises people. On the one extreme, there are people who say if you criticise prevent, you're giving succor to the terrorists and condoning terrorism. On the other hand, you have those people who think if you participate in prevent, you're criminalising the community and it's guilt by association. I don't subscribe to either. I think prevent is the only show in town. The intention is to help those who are vulnerable, who are being exploited, who are being targeted by charismatic preachers, by radicalisers. And I think the publication last week of the data shows progress. It shows a willingness on the part of the government and the police to be transparent. There are lessons we can learn from there. But I think the best way to build confidence in the public is neighbourhood policing by consent. Look, if you're a young person and you have lunch with a police officer in your school, if you're a mum and dad and the police have given you advice to keep your home safe, if you're a youth leader and the police have come and organised a five-a-side football tournament, your relationship with the police is different to the traditional one where you'll see the police drive around, you never see them, and you only see them there arresting you or stopping and searching you. And that trust and confidence is crucial because it means that mom, dad, uncle, auntie, youth leader, friend of somebody at school can say to the police, look, I'm a bit worried about my friend or my nephew or my niece or my son or my daughter. What's your advice? What can you do? And that's really important because we now have a situation where people are being radicalised and groomed in their bedroom and from 3,000 miles away. So, we need to continue to build that relationship. And my worry is this: if there are further cuts made, the Commissioner said last week, the thing that we'll have to stop doing is the preventative, proactive work. The evidence tells us that the preventative, proactive work makes it safer, and that's why I'm worried.
Just on that, just two supplementary points. With regards to, and I'm grateful to you, when you were a Member of Parliament, supporting the campaign to ensure that we use the correct terminology to refer to the terrorist organisation, that's because it was neither Islamic nor a state. It had deliberately chosen those words to get people sucked into the word disillusioned and vulnerable. One of the biggest challenges that we have, despite what people say, Daesh is defeated in Raqqa, but you have to defeat the idea, the ideology, the appeal, which sucks people into extremism and then into terrorism in some circumstances. How do we defeat that?
Well, it means all of us playing a role. That means the internet service providers playing a role to take down stuff that's glorifying hatred or that's giving a space to preachers. They're not simply to have to take down, they've got to report it. That means us giving the confidence to communities to take on these perverse interpretations of a form of Islam that you and I'm sure now don't recognise. It means giving teachers the biggest referrals came from education to the prevent. Second was police, then was family and friends. Give them the confidence to have a conversation about some of these things with young people. Part of it is people like you as role models have a role to play to say to young people, listen, you can be a Westerner and a Muslim and be successful. You are respected and treated with courtesy and respect. It means providing safe spaces for people to express concerns, whether it's concerns around foreign policy or concerns around other issues they have, so they can be active citizens. I think the idea that the police by themselves can solve this is ridiculous. The idea that good preachers by themselves can defeat this is not realistic. I think all of us have a role to play.
With that, just a final question if I may. With regards to role models, I think you do a great job in terms of being British and being Muslim. Having just come back from Pakistan as a trade envoy, they're very much looking forward to having you back in that country. Touching on that, you talked about 7 terrorist attacks being thwarted. Would you agree with me that, in part, whether it's terrorist attacks here in London, or whether it's in the United States, or whether it's in Tunisia, or whether it's in Pakistan, countries, when working together, if they had information which could lead to preventing a terrorist attack around the world, whether they have access to a database or not, those countries will share that information with us.
Agreed. And actually we've got very good bilateral relations with all sorts of countries around the world. There's additional value added by our relationship with the EU, and I'm sure we'll come into that later on.
Rehman Chishti? Yeah, just coming on to the point which Sarah raised. Sarah and I both did the Channel 4 News on tackling knife crime last night, and we had Jennifer there from a local charity who said, look, dealing with young people carrying knives is not simply about policing, funding, resources. You've got issues with, this is my word for now, you've got retailers in terms of selling knives, you've got legislation, you've got policing, and you've got early intervention. And if you then look back in terms of in Kent, my county, if you look at the serious murders that have been committed with knives, these are ordinary knives. These are not zombie knives. These are ordinary knives which people have in their houses and either been taken out to commit crime or to be in possession of them. So the issue is about cultural change, stopping people in the first place carrying knives and the early interventions. How do we go back and getting everyone to do more? And I know you said parents asking schools, what are they doing? But the same question also needs to be asked of parents. What are they doing? Because these people who are carrying knives, mostly young people, and then some of these 11, 12, 13-year-olds should not be out. And there's a responsibility for everyone, as well as parents themselves, to ensure that children are not going out at times where they should not be and carrying things which they don't want to be carrying knives.
Sure. So I don't think there's anything you've said that I disagree with to your question. My response is this: look, of course, parents have roles to play, as do big brothers and sisters, uncle and aunties and elders. Anybody who's got teenage children, the idea they listen to their parents. We're going to be realistic, and that's why the campaign we're launching this week is young people speaking to young people, which is actually one of the most effective ways we've seen. But we've also got the phrase used, influencers. Who do young people? Who can influence young people? I'm afraid the bad news is not you and me. And so we've got a number of artists and others involved as influencers to try and persuade young people. Look, any time a young person decides to pick up a knife and leave home with it, that's failure. The idea that the young person is more safe by carrying a knife, or it gives them respect. And so we've got to address the root causes. My point though is that many young people won't reach that decision not to carry a knife by themselves. They need help. Part of that is persuading them not to carry a knife in the first place, but I don't apologise for this, a big part of it is enforcement, operation sector, which the Commissioner spoke about, which is knife sweeps, a targeted stop and search, intelligence-led policing, doing all the things that we know can deal with the enforcement side, but we've got to try and stop a young person carrying a knife in the first place.